This is the Blood Red podcast from the Liverpool Echo.
Hello everyone and welcome to Friday's Liverpool Blood Red podcast with the Echo. Myself, Sean Bradbury, on hosting duties today, and with me I have Librog Supremo, Theo Squires. Theo, how are you doing?
Not too bad, Sean. You?
Very well, very well. 2 presses today so far. Big day on the blogs.
Yeah, it's been busy. Different things coming out of both of them, I suppose.
Excellent, and we will move on to Klopp's one in due course.
Yeah,
and
don't want to spoil it.
No spoilers yet. And we also have our Liverpool correspondent, both home and away, Paul Gorst. Gorst, how's tricks?
Not bad, Sean. Not bad. Busy week as ever, but glad to be back in situ for the latest pod.
Excellent. Well, we will crack on with said pod, and we'll start in that press conference. So, Gorsty, goes to you first. Loads to get through really on the presser alone, because Klopp was on good form. He was talking about this and that, but injury situation, I guess. Let's start there. Joel Matip, Klopp confirmed, will be out for a bit of a while. A few weeks was Klopp's exact words, and he was pressed on that and kind of said, well, could be at least a couple. Doesn't sound great. Could obviously include City, which is not too long away. Big blow for the Reds.
Yeah, I think certainly Liverpool under Klopp are always quite closely guarded with their injury timescales, and we've seen it with Alisson, didn't we? I mean, everyone thought at first it wasn't going to be a particularly lengthy one, and then weeks go by and Klopp keeps giving us answers, and then before you know it, Alisson's been out for over 2 months. I think this unfortunately might be something similar, where Klopp just keeps kind of saying, well, he's not available for this one, what about next week? Well, we'll have to see, and then before you know it, Joel Matip might miss the next 5 or 6 games. Hopefully I'm wrong on that and he is back for Manchester City, but it's looking highly unlikely at this stage. He's picked up a knee injury, hasn't he, which has kept him out. And that's a big blow for Liverpool because he's been in such great form. And if you look at Liverpool's other central defenders, obviously we all know about Virgil van Dijk and how great he is and has been. But there are maybe 1 or 2 question marks over Joe Gomez at the moment, and Dejan Lovren always divides opinions. So it could be a little bit of a blow for Liverpool. Well, certainly quite a big blow, I'd suggest. And it's looking likely that, I mean, he's certainly going to miss Aston Villa tomorrow, but I think Liverpool can still get by without him then. But be a massive issue if he does miss Manchester City, which it's looking like that will be the case.
I guess that's the key follow-on point, really, isn't it, Theo? The other centre-half options are fit. Lovren and Gomez, no problem. They've been playing recently, but Gomez just part of a back four that conceded 5. Not necessarily that there were goals on him, but hasn't been in the greatest of form when we've seen him so far this season. And Lovren, I think he recovered to an extent against Spurs, but a little bit of sloppiness against Genk was arguably a fault for the goal that they scored. How do you see that kind of shaking up? I mean, they're fit and they're available, but do you think it is a massive negative for Liverpool, or you're not too concerned?
I'm not too concerned, just because of the fact that Liverpool centre-backs alongside Van Dijk, they've always had a run of games, and there's always that spell where they're a bit shaky at first, but when they settle in and they get into it, they always seem to form great partnerships with Van Dijk, like we saw 2 years ago. Lovren was the best player on the pitch in the Champions League final, had a really good, strong second half of the season, obviously reached the World Cup final. And then the defence, first half of last season with Joe Gomez, it was superb. Like, that's probably the best defensive record Liverpool have had in the past couple of years. He was really unfortunate to break his leg at Burnley. And like Gorsty was saying there, when they're playing the cards close to the chest, it was similar with Gomez, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Before you knew it was 6 months. And then Joel Matip, well, we all know how brilliant he's been for the past year, I suppose. But they've all got this ability there that they can all do the job. And there's always seems to be that doubt about them when they come in. But when they settle, it's fine. And if you want to get worried about these Liverpool defensive options, especially with City on the horizon, just look at City. Look at their options at the moment. Like Otamendi's missed a few. John Stones, he's only just back and he's looking really shaky. Obviously Laporte's out. They've had to have Rodri there, but he's been ruled out. Fernandinho's an aging midfielder. They're in a worse state than Liverpool.
I think that's a fair point. The other player, Gorst, you've got to mention on the injury front was Naby Keita. What did Klopp let on about him, and what's the situation there?
He just said he was going to have to check, and that was pretty much it. But again, I mean, he's probably more than anyone. Naby Keita's had his injury problems, hasn't he? And he's not someone who's had one lengthy injury. He's had about half a dozen little niggles that have kept him out for 3 weeks here and a month there, and it's really disappointing for him. And it must be so frustrating, because every time he builds up a slight head of steam, injury comes in and kind of takes that away. If you look at, he picked up that adductor problem in the Champions League semi-final against Barcelona, and then he went on international duty with Guinea and was kind of rushed back for that because he's their talisman. He was never fully fit at that. He got sent home early, picked up another injury just before the Super Cup, and then comes back from that. And picks up another one, and I might have even missed a little setback somewhere along the way as well. So he's been so unfortunate with injuries, but I mean, it must be so frustrating for him. But Liverpool fans are still left waiting, aren't they? 18 months since he signed, a year. He was signed. Obviously, Liverpool knew he was coming a year before he was actually signed. So Liverpool fans have waited an awful long time to see the absolute best of Naby Keita, and they're still waiting to see it. And it's a frustrating thing for the supporters. I can't even imagine how gutted it must be for him to keep having these setbacks. But sooner or later, he's going to have to start putting a run of games together and show that he can stay injury free and show what he can do. Because I'm getting a little bit worried, if I'm honest. He was a bit anonymous the other night, and then went off, didn't he, for Curtis Jones, who was excellent. To be fair to him, he took his chance. He laid on Divock Origi to make it 4-4, was it, on the night? I can't even remember now, if I'm honest. So yeah, I am a little bit concerned about Naby Keita. No one asked about Xherdan Shaqiri, funnily enough. He's another one who's had his calf problem, and we've seen with Alisson, when you get that particular injury, it can keep you out for a couple of months, and no one asked Klopp about it, and he didn't mention it. So he's another one who's kind of going under the radar, and another one who Liverpool are keeping close to the chest. So it's interesting the way Liverpool kind of handle their injury news and what they release to the public. I always remember them bringing out the news about Alex Oxlade-Chamberlain and how serious his knee injury was. Around about the same time, it looked like they were going to sign Alisson, and I think that might have been a little bit premeditated from the club to kind of bury the bad news, if you like, amongst the good news, because I don't think anyone thought he was going to be out for as long as he was after his initial injury. So I think it's very much a tactic from the club, and some might say it's quite sensible and wise to be doing it that way. Others would just prefer to know the full extent of players' injuries, but that's the way Liverpool handle it under Jurgen Klopp.
On the Keita question then, Theo, I mean, it seems a bit of a perennial one on this pod for the past, this year or so. Do you have any concerns about him, and were you thinking this was the point where he was going to kick on after, I think Gorst was right, he wasn't great the other night at all, but came on against United, had that run against Genk where he looked pretty sharp as well. What did you make of him, before the injury?
He's definitely one who needs his opportunity, and it's always promising to deliver, not quite doing it. It's similar to quite a few players in this squad, like you're expecting Ryan Bruce to push on and it's not quite happened. But with Keita, you expect more. There is that expectation, there's the price tag, and you're thinking, he's coming up to nearly 18 months now. He should have done something. And really, we've only had a couple of fleeting moments, like I think the Porto game last year, that little run where he scored against Huddersfield. It was a couple of games with Southampton as well, wasn't it? And he did look a good player. He looked so good in pre-season, start of last season, and it's not happened for him, and he needs opportunities. And it's one of those where Liverpool's midfield is probably the most competitive part of their team. And you look at it, it's like, how is he supposed to get in that and get that run of games if every time he plays 2-3 games he's going to break down again? Not too worried at this stage, just because we've all known how busy this December period coming up is going to be. I'm sure we'll get to in a second, but there will be opportunities for him to play there as long as he's not out for a prolonged period of time. Even if he's got a knock going to Qatar, that's some of the best medical facilities there are on the planet. So I'm sure Jurgen Klopp will be looking at that, some extra training for some of these players, extra ways to get them back and get them at their best. But then you do get to the stage with Naby Keita now as well. If we get to the end of this season and he's not in that starting 11, he's not cemented his place and he's still getting these knocks, when do you start saying enough is enough? Like, it's 50-60 million pound player, and he's not playing like that. He's not delivered anything near that. I don't want to write him off yet, but you can't do 2, 3, go into that third year and still not be delivering.
Well, we shall see. Fingers crossed he does get that good run of games and gets a chance to shine and show what he's all about. Another player then, Gorst, who may be missing tomorrow, but for entirely different reasons, is Fabinho. And Klopp has pressed on this, how he's going to handle his situation, because he is one yellow card away from a booking. And of course, if that came tomorrow, it would mean he misses the City game. What did you make of Klopp's response, and how would you play it personally? Because it's a tricky one.
Yeah, Liverpool simply can't afford to be without Fabinho when they play Manchester City. That is the biggest game of the season. They can't afford they can afford to lose it, but it'd be such a deflating defeat, wouldn't it, with Liverpool flying high at the moment and looking to kind of kick on and establish a more dominant lead than the one they've already got, which is already a healthy one. For me, I wouldn't play Fabinho tomorrow. I think it's too great a risk to. If there is a position where you're going to get a booking, it's a defensive midfield position for me. Every day of the week, he picked up one at Chelsea, which was a cynical one, but it was brilliant for Liverpool because Chelsea were really coming on strong in that game. And I can't remember who it was. It might have been Kante. He literally just grabbed them and just taught him stopping this attack, and he went into the book for that, which is exactly what you want your defensive midfielder doing when you're trying to see out a game. But I wouldn't be putting him in tomorrow. I think Liverpool have got more than enough to get past Villa without him, and I'd have him fully rested and without danger of missing the City game. Is it November the 10th?
Yeah.
Yeah. So for me, I wouldn't put him in. Jurgen Klopp said he hadn't made his mind up. Yeah, he said he wouldn't be going into the game without making challenges and without making tackles because you quite simply can't do it in the Premier League. So it's a difficult one. If he does play Fabinho, Fabinho's going to have to try and play that game so intelligently and measured and without mistiming anything. So I think that's too much of a tightrope to walk. Personally, I wouldn't play him.
It is a dilemma, isn't it, Theo? Because, like Gorst said, he's so key to this team. He's been in such good form. I actually think he plays quite well when he's been on a yellow. There's been quite a few times, especially
got one against Barcelona, didn't he?
Yeah, a couple of Champions League games where he's ridden it out well. But it's one thing to play half an hour, maybe even an hour in a game when you're on the yellow and manage the situation. But like Gorst says, if it's from the start, it's something Villa can target. Do you think it's a clear case of just not risking him tomorrow and saving him for next weekend?
I wouldn't risk him just because you think of how Villa play. It's that 4-1-4-1 formation. They're going to have Jack Grealish and McGinn either side of him. They're both tricky players, quick on the ball. That's quite an obvious target if they're just going to try, because their game plan is get it to those two.
Yeah.
So they're going to be trying to run at Fabinho, race past him, and the chances are he will make a dodgy tackle at some point because that's the type of player he is. But that's what you expect in those positions. And I think it was the City game last year, wasn't it, at the Etihad? He didn't start that one. Everyone was surprised because he was just settling into the team, just making it his own. Liverpool lost the game, ultimately cost them the title. He's not looked back since. He's basically been one of the first names on the team sheet ever since. So if you're looking at it, do you want to risk him not playing against City, or would you rather have him miss out against Villa? Villa's the obvious one. It's going to be Villa Park. It's one of the more intimidating grounds in the division. They're going to be up against the league leaders. They're going to be up for it. The fans are going to be up for it. The players are going to be up for it. And if they start well, that's going to get that added spice in it, that added fire. And that's the sort of game that you could see him getting a silly booking in.
Absolutely. Well, I think we're unanimous there, but of course we'll come on to our team selection later and we will see tomorrow how Klopp chooses to play this. Last point on the presser then, Gorsty. And in fact, the longest portion of the presser was almost a 5-minute segment where Klopp was asked about the Carabao Cup, about fixtures, about the crazy schedule situation that's unfolding ahead of Liverpool's next couple of months. And yeah, he gave this lengthy response and was talking about FIFA and potential ideas of meetings to discuss this situation, and I think he has a very fair point. What was your take on what he said first of all? And Liverpool are almost seeming to be punished by their success so far this season because they played in pretty much every game they could have played in all competitions so far. But we've got a real tricky situation about when this quarter-final is going to be played. Yeah,
I think it's very interesting. I think the way a lot of football coverage is now is say if Jurgen Klopp has a bit of a moan about something that's seen as reason for ridicule and criticism, and it's a way of having a go at Liverpool as a whole. And I think a lot of elite managers fall into the same bracket. I'm not just saying that's solely reserved for Jurgen Klopp, but to be fair to the Liverpool manager, he was making a wider point about football in general. He wasn't just saying this all has a big impact on me and my plans. He was making the point for football in general that these elite players are being flogged too often, too hard, being asked to play in basically that there are no international friendlies anymore. Every international game is a competitive game. They're getting sent across the world, and it's having a big impact, and it obviously has a negative impact on his Liverpool squad, just like it will do for Manchester City squad, Manchester United. Any of the elite clubs you want to mention all would have a problem with this type of stuff, and some might say, well, tough when you've got to deal with it, but he generally was making a point that something is going to have to give, and the football authority is going to have to look at their calendar and decide what are fixtures that can be cut and taken down, because it's going to have a problem with the players. Are going to have a problem later in their careers if they play too much football by a certain age, and that's going to dilute the overall quality of the game that so many fans across the world love. So I thought he had a wider point, specifically with Liverpool over the next couple of weeks, finding a spot for. I mean, the West Ham game's already been postponed for December. They're already, that date for the Carabao Cup quarter-final isn't going to be played because Liverpool are in Qatar. There's some suggestion that discussions have taken place that it's going to be 2 Liverpool games on the same night, which would just be absolute farce of a situation. Could you imagine Pep Lijnders taking charge of Villa Park with Harvey Elliott and Curtis Jones while Klopp's in Qatar with Mane and Salah? It'd be a ridiculous situation, and surely something has to be, a better solution has to be found, and that's up to the football authorities and the clubs involved to come to a reasonable conclusion. But generally, Klopp was making the point that, this is probably too much, and a solution has to be found. And I thought he had a point, to be perfectly honest. He made a very good point where he said, not one day do the authorities think of the players and not the wallet. And I thought that was such a massive statement for an elite manager to make, and it's an interesting one, and we'll see if anything is made of it. But until more managers come out with similar gripes, I think it will just be a case of like it and lump it Jurgen, which is a shame really, because he was making a point for everyone.
Well, since Klopp made this comment, actually just before we came to the pod, Guardiola in his presser was asked about it, and he said, Theo, that he completely agrees with Klopp. So like Gorst, he says, this united front of backing for that position where the managers are representing their players and putting this argument forward about how they're overworked. Hopefully that does come to pass, and a serious conversation's had about this with the football authorities. But where do you think the answer lies? Is it a case of trimming the domestic schedule, or is it, as Gorst was alluding to, these international fixtures, the lack of friendlies now and the Nations League and that type of thing? Do you think there is an obvious remedy to it?
It's a bit of a joke, really, isn't it? It's a shambles, because you think, why are they only having this conversation now when Liverpool have reached the quarterfinals of the League Cup? Why was this not had at the start of the season when they should have known Liverpool were going to play in the World Club Championships, and the fact that they didn't until the invite came in, that was obviously a farce. But then you're looking at it here, it's just going to get worse the next few years, because you're thinking, 2021, they're going to have the expanded tournament in the summer. So Liverpool players are going to have to play in that summer in this new tournament. You've got the Africa Cup of Nations in the July. So you've got Mohamed Salah and Naby Keita, Sadio Mane. They're going to have to do in this World Cup for the clubs in June, playing the Cup of Nations in July, and being the start of the season in August. And then you've got the World Cup, December 2022? Is that when it is? And then that's going to mean the season starts earlier and finishes later. So it's just going to build up and get worse and worse over the next few years. But then you look at the fixtures, what can they cut? They've already got rid of FA Cup replays. You could say, get rid of one of your League Cup semi-finals, but that's just one game. And then you look at the league fixtures, it's like, well, they've spoken before about maybe doing 18 teams in the Premier League, or splitting it in 2, and then, inviting Celtic, Rangers. Don't really want to get into that, because that's a whole different conversation. And then you think, well, do you want to get rid of the FA Cup? Do you want to get rid of the League Cup? Do you just have them more streamlined? So you say you do up to your quarterfinals in the League Cup in August, September, or you say, right, all the top Premier League teams, you're in the quarterfinals, but then that means the lower league teams, they don't get to play the big teams, they don't get the big cup runs. You're not going to please everyone, but there has to be a compromise in there somewhere. And I think it's going to get to a stage where you are seeing serious injury or something, because the players, how are they supposed to get through the next 2-3 summers and that World Cup and then go again? It's crazy.
And this isn't limited to just Liverpool, by the way, is it? It's a problem for virtually every top club in Europe, and not even the top clubs, maybe the clubs who are in that bracket below, who've obviously got top international players as well. So it's a really difficult. So, well, what is the solution? That is the big question, isn't it? I just hope they don't completely get rid of the League Cup, because I'm a big fan of it.
Well, absolutely. And while we don't know when the next round is going to be played, certainly in Liverpool's case, what we do know is how mad a game that was on Wednesday night. So we'll briefly touch on that before we move on to the weekend's action. Gorsty, I mean, I can't even remember the last time Liverpool contested a 5-5. Maybe they have, but what kind of game was that like? What was it like to be there in the press box on Wednesday?
I don't think I'll cover a crazier game for the rest of my career. I certainly haven't covered one as wild as it before. And I don't think I've ever been at one live, to be honest. Remember 4-4s at Arsenal, and you can always point out one or two games. Arsenal Reading was 7-5 a few years ago. But just the nature of that game, the topsy-turvy nature, the way it just kept swinging back and forth, some of the goals that were scored on the night, it was unbelievable. And weirdly, I never actually thought Liverpool were going to lose, even when it was 3-1 and it was a 4-2 at one point. I never thought that this was done and dusted, and I think that just speaks to the mentality that Liverpool have got in the group as a whole, we've spoken loads of times about how strong mentally the senior side are, but that seems to have transmitted to some of the young guns as well, who just refused to let the head drop on the night. It was a Anfield start for 5 players, I think. Sepp van den Berg, Brewster, Harvey Elliott, Nico Williams, who's making his senior debut, Curtis Jones, and the goalkeeper Caoimhin Kelleher. So many young players getting the chance to play at Anfield. Might have been a bit overawed by it all and the nature of the game, but they all stuck to the task. And I think it was great to see Nico Williams in the dying seconds slinging in the cross for Divock Origi to score yet again another massive goal in Liverpool's season. That's all he tends to do, really, doesn't he? He just shows up and scores iconic goals, and what a game. I mean, it was. I mean, writing me match report was tough, but in terms of the entertainment value, it was incredible. What a game.
Theo, who Gorsty's listed obviously all the debutants there, and so many of the youngsters stood out. Who particularly caught your eye on the night?
Probably Curtis Jones. Like, he effectively came on and changed the game. And like, you've seen him before for the 23s and in the UEFA Youth League, and he seems to have taken it on another level. And before you get players that come through and you think, oh, maybe they'll get a couple of games and that'll be it, they'll have to go on loan or that. But he's starting to show some real promise here. And you think, when you've got you've got players in the Liverpool squad that may be getting a bit older and they won't be here forever. I'm thinking of your Lallanas, Milners, maybe even Shaqiri. Maybe there is a squad role there for Curtis Jones in a couple of years. And if he keeps this up, he could easily get a chance there. And what he brings to it as well is he's not just a normal central midfielder, is he? He's doing this in that wide left role. And he's shown he can step up, he can come off the bench and he can deliver. No, I don't think you're looking at that Liverpool bench midweek, he was the obvious name to come on first, wasn't he? Because it was so young. And he delivered. Like, normally in League Cup games, I will put Salah on there just in case. They don't need to now. That's how strong the squad is. And I know he's going back to the fixtures and that and going, I don't want to play this game. Jurgen Klopp probably didn't really want to play this game. But you watch those celebrations after the penalty shootout, how much it meant to the youngsters. You've got Harvey Elliott down on his knees screaming, Ryan Brewster and all the lads just run into the corner. They want to be in this competition. The senior lads might not want to play because of all the burnout, but it's a great opportunity for the youngsters and they grabbed it with both hands.
Totally. Into staying on Curtis Jones, Gorst, I mean, obviously there's a lot of hype around Harvey Elliott. Every time we've seen him, he's looked great, especially against MK Dons in this competition. And I guess Brewster's been the one who, over the last year or so, seems to have been knocking on the door and looking to get an opportunity. But is there some sense in which Jones has almost gone under the radar a little bit? Because like Theo says, we've seen him in different positions, wide left, I think that was against MK Dons, wasn't it? And then in a different position the other night. But he does look like he could almost be about to break through.
Yeah, I think he has gone under the radar slightly because he's someone who's always been at the academy, I think, since under 9 age. So he's been here half of his life, and I think that might be why he's sort of not being as heralded as much as Harvey Elliott, who was obviously a summer signing for Liverpool in a summer transfer window where virtually no business was done. So all eyes were always going to be on him, and the fact that he's the youngest player in Premier League history as well. So maybe that was a reason for it. Ryan Brewster we know about and have done for a long time. And maybe there's been a little bit more attention on him because he has been the one who's been expected to push on a lot more in terms of making it into the senior squad. And there was a suggestion about 18 months ago that Liverpool were not looking at Timo Werner as a transfer target because Jurgen Klopp didn't want to block the pathway for Brewster. So you can see why the attention has been on those two and not Jones as much. But he come on, didn't he, the other night, and that pass for Origi was a very good one. It just basically cut Arsenal's midfield open, and Origi was able to finish it off with a great finish. And I always think young players, it takes a while before you find out where their best position is. And I know he's the captain of the under-23s at the moment, and he can play central midfield, he can play wide on the left. I actually think possibly wide on the left is his position at the moment, where he's free to make the mistakes and lose the ball, trying one or two things that don't always come off. You do that in the centre of midfield and you're leaving your defence with a lot to do. So plenty of time on his side to iron out those little things to his game that he needs to, and he's another one who's got a massive future ahead of him.
Whilst we're on the youngsters, can I just make a point on Brewster here? Like, you think he's played a couple of games, I'm not sure if you two have seen it, but he's got quite a bit of criticism on social media. Like fans saying, he's overhyped, he's not the player they thought he was, and they're already giving up on him. But we think Alex Oxlade-Chamberlain, he's come out after the last couple of games and said he's not playing as well as he wants. Brewster was out longer than him. He's not played competitive football before. He's going to take time, and they're just throwing him in at the deep end. And just because Oxlade-Chamberlain scores a couple of worldies, fans are like, oh, that's fine. And the slack this 19-year-old is getting just because he hasn't gone and got a couple of goals in his first couple of games, it's crazy to write him off. He's still a talent there. Jurgen Klopp obviously rates him by the transfer business. He's going to be an option. It's crazy to just turn on these young players.
But I'd always temper that by some of the opinions you see on social media just aren't worth a second glance. I mean, there's a lot of reason debate on there, but there's a lot of nonsense as well. I think that probably falls into the nonsense category, writing off Rhian Brewster.
No, absolutely. I mean, the age he is, like you're saying, I thought that was a good battling performance from him the other night. It almost showed the other side of him. You think of him, and from what we've seen of him, as just not just a pure finisher, but someone who, that's what he's there in the side to do, but played a kind of different role, obviously exerted a bit of pressure to play his part in that opener, the own goal. And if just a couple of situations where the ball had fallen right for him, he'd have been through, and then hopefully we would have seen that great finishing instinct that he clearly does possess. So, yeah, totally agree with you there, Theo. One other man, just want to give another quick word to. I know Gorsty's already mentioned him, but Divock Origi, it struck me the other night. I was kind of looking at that team, and as the game progressed, obviously he had the vital contributions, but I was thinking of him as one of the senior men in that team, which he undoubtedly is, but he's still only 24 as well, Theo. I mean, what you make of his situation now? Because he played very well, and obviously it was a game in which he started, but in typical Divock fashion, he had the final say right at the end of the game with 2 late goals, and did his typically very cool and muted celebration, took it all in his stride. But is he? What's his kind of situation now? Is he almost at the point where he's got to be having more starts for the first team, or do you think he's just happy doing what he's doing?
You just made me realise how much younger than me he is.
I know, 24. It is mad.
But he seems to have been around forever. I remember him scoring at the World Cup.
Yeah, he was 19, wasn't he, at the time? Yeah.
He's having this impact more and more when he comes on, but I think he's got to be realistic. He knows he's not getting in that front three when they're available. And maybe it's at the stage now where Jurgen Klopp occasionally goes to the 4-2-3-1 and he will get a chance there, like we saw with Shaqiri last season. But when you have that whole Liverpool squad, all fit, all firing, he doesn't start. He all knew that was the case when he signed his contract. It's probably one of those where it's going to protect his value a bit. He can do another year or two at Liverpool and then assess, because there will be a stage where he doesn't want to be a substitute at Liverpool. But then players are more accepting of it when they're at the right club.
Yeah.
Like, thinking back to United when they won the treble, they had 4 proper good quality strikers. Ole Gunnar Solskjaer was just that substitute striker then. You look at Manchester City now. Yes, they rotate it a bit more as Aguero's legs age, but Jesus has had to make do with that more of a substitute role for the majority of the time. So if you're winning trophies, your team's winning every week, you've got to be sensible about whether you really want to walk away from that and give up on that success when you are going to get a lot of opportunities still just because of the amount of games, and you are normally the first player off the bench. So it's what he wants, whether he wants the medals when he retires or he wants to say he played as the main man for, say, a Wolves or a mid-table team. It's one of those, isn't it? Personally, I think he'll stay for a little bit longer. He wants the medals. That's why he signed this contract. It can't have just been about emotion or sentiment because he scored on Champions League final. But how he feels now, how he felt in the summer, could be very different in a year's time.
Well, long may he continue doing what he's doing, scoring every single goal he scores seems to be a big one for the Reds, no matter what game it's in. Final point on this one then, Gorsty, and just want to turn to something that happened before the match, essentially, was Pep Lijnders took the pre-match press conference, as he did, to be fair, I think ahead of the MK Dons clash again in this competition. But I think before that one, Klopp was he at an awards ceremony? He was away, wasn't he? So I think that was put out there as one of the reasons why Lijnders was doing it. Again, obviously fair enough. It's the Carabao Cup, and it was a different situation, and it made sense. But we've seen a little bit on social media, especially since he did that first press conference and got a bit of exposure. Quite a few fans thinking, "Hang on, this fella sounds brilliant. He's steeped in Klopp's philosophy. He knows the club and the players well." And I guess almost some very initial and early talk of possible succession candidate when Klopp eventually does decide to leave. Do you think there could be a kernel of truth in that?
I'd suggest he's the front runner at the moment. I mean, it's like the old football manager trick, isn't it, where you can click send assistant to the press conferences. That's what Klopp seems to be doing for these Carabao Cup games, and he's been so impressive when he's been sitting there in the big chair handing out his tactical dogma. Just by chance, I've missed both of those press conferences. I've only seen them on video, but he comes across as very passionate, very intelligent, such a knowledgeable person on the game, and that's very much the way he's seen inside the camp at Liverpool. I think he's well under 40. He's one stint in management with was it Nijmegen, was it, in Holland? That didn't quite go to plan, but that can happen for a manager in his first steps in management. You look at someone like Gary Neville, who went to Valencia and was done within months, wasn't he, back in the Sky Sports studio. And I think a lot of people would say he's another excellent analysis of the game. So Lijnders, I'd suggest that, I wouldn't be saying that the Klopp's anywhere near the end of his Liverpool tenure. He's still got 3 years left on his contract, but if you were to ask me right now who would be his successor, I'd put money on him. We know people's reputations and stock can change almost overnight in football, but he seems to be someone who's very steeped in the way the Klopp works, and he's his right-hand man and knows the game, knows his players. So yeah, he's been very impressive by what I've seen and heard from him so far. And I know we've done pieces with him before, and we think we had a 2-part chat with him earlier this year. So I'd advise anyone who's a little bit unaware of what he does behind the scenes to go and check both of those pieces out. So there's a fascinating insight into him and what he does at Melwood, and you can see why he's such a highly regarded coach. I
think Gorsty's made the key point there, Theo, which is obviously that Klopp's got several years left on his contract. The club made it clear, certainly in the summer and whenever there's an intimation coming out the club since, that they'd like him to stay beyond that, ideally. So yeah, there is no question that this is a decision that's going to have to be made anytime soon. But do you agree that Lijnders could be the front runner? We had heard from Carragher this week. Jamie Carragher was speaking about Steven Gerrard's prospects, and when the question came up of could he potentially be the next candidate to take over from Klopp, he said why not, and pointed to the job he's doing at Rangers. I think those two, certainly at the moment, from this kind of hopefully quite long-term perspective, seem to be the two names that are being touted. How do you see it?
Personally, I want it to go to Lijnders as things stand, just because there's so much success at Liverpool and it's smoother transition, isn't it? Whilst you can say, Steven Gerrard's doing a decent job in Scotland, it's a very different task to come back to Liverpool and just pick up where Jurgen Klopp's left off. It was such a tough job for Klopp to transform them from missing out on Champions League, missing out on Europa League, to winning the Champions League and hopefully winning the Premier League. It's not going to be an easy job to just go, this squad's great, I'm just going to sit back and let them carry on. At least Lijnders, he's there, he's part of it. And we've seen Liverpool before when they've had just given it to the assistant and it's worked brilliantly with Shankly, Paisley, Fagan, etc. But my one concern whether that is really going to happen is because when Klopp was asked the question, he said Gerrard. But it's a hard one to call because Klopp obviously trusts Lijnders, and it is more they're all on the same page. It feels like a proper team, and it's not just the players; it's the coaching staff too. I think back to say when Rafa was in charge, I remember Sammy Lee doing a couple. I think like Arsenal away, and had that weird cross kit with grey shirt, whatever, when Robbie Keane scored.
Yeah.
But I think that was when Rafa was ill, so Sammy Lee did that. There was a game when Brendan Rodgers was ill as well, so Colin Pascoe did it. But the managers there have always been the main men. It's not been about the coaching staff. Whereas with Klopp, it is, when he wins the manager, we've all done this. And you've not really seen something like that at Liverpool since probably Gerard Houllier and Phil Thompson. And that's only because Phil Thompson sort of had to become the manager for 6 months. So I reckon Lijnders, it's still early days. Like Gorsty said, he's very young, but he's there. He's seeing these all on a daily basis. And you've seen many times in football when the assistant stepped up and has done a good job, but we've also seen when they've stepped up and not done a good job. So it's the gamble Liverpool have to make when the decision has to be made in 2-3 years' time.
I think Klopp might have said that one about Gerrard just sort of almost playing to the gallery. I mean, if he'd have said, Stevie's not getting my job, it's going to be Pep. I think if he'd have said that, everyone would have been like, well, come on, why are you saying that? But I think Lijnders, just hearing them speak in these Carabao Cup press conferences is fascinating, and it gives you it's a little bit of a different voice from Klopp's, and just gives you a little bit of a different insight, and you can see why he's so highly regarded as one of Europe's brightest coaches, definitely.
Absolutely. Well, as we say, I would stress again that hopefully this is a decision that is way far down the line, but just become a bit of a talking point in recent weeks, obviously. Turning our attentions then to something much more immediate. Villa tomorrow, a trip to Birmingham for you and the Reds, Gorsty.
Yes.
What have you made of them so far? Because I was just having a look at the table before, so 11 points from 10. Reasonable start. They've already won 3 games and they've only lost 1 of 5 at home, so pretty solid. Obviously a bit of a cliche, but do you think this is a bit of a banana skin for the Reds with a big week to come? And obviously not saying for 1 minute that the focus will already be on City, but pretty crucial clash tomorrow.
Yeah, it's a big game, and it is a difficult one. I think I was looking before. I think Villa have won 4 of the last 6, and one of those was a defeat to Manchester City. And to be fair, in the first half last week against City, they played quite well. They were compact. They got men behind the ball, and they broke out when they could. And it was only the fact that City scored within a minute of the restart to kind of crushed their spirits a little bit that day. So it's going to be a difficult one. Dean Smith's got them playing good football. I like McGinn, I like Jack Grealish, Wesley up front is a bit of a handful. So it'll be a tough one for Liverpool, no question, particularly if they approach it without Fabinho, who, again, I would suggest is left on the bench. So it'll be a tough one, but you can't skirt around the issue. If Liverpool want to win this Premier League, they need to be going to Villa Park and winning this one.
What have you made of him, Theo? I mean, Gorsty's already mentioned a couple of their threats there, but Grealish, McGinn, even Wesley's popped up with a few goals and filled the Tammy Abraham void. Got a bit of threat about them?
Yeah, definitely. Look, in the past, Villa have been a banana skin for Liverpool, and it's always that sort of striker, isn't it? Like Wesley, they had Benteke and he always seemed to score. Yeah. So hopefully Wesley doesn't pick up there. Yeah. But it's those two playmakers. McGinn has been great for them, scored a lot of important goals, getting them promotion. Grealish, I'm still a bit undecided on him just because the way Villa talk about him, there's been that hype for so long. He's now in his mid-20s and he's not got the England cap. He's not getting the goals or assists that you'd expect for a top quality player. I'm not saying he's a bad player and he's obviously good on the ball, but there's still, jury's still out whether he can make it at the very elite level. But they are a dangerous team, and when you look at the teams that have come up, how close it is in the mid-table, I don't think anyone's thinking, Villa are going to be in a relegation fight at the end of the year just yet. They've spent a lot of money. They've got some good players in, like we've seen Tyrone Mings, been in England squads, and Tommy Eaton, who was a very good signing in goal. They've got a player out wide that Mo Salah will know very well, and Trezeguet. Yeah. Got a lot of threats there, and they know what they're going to do. Like Dean Smith, he's just come in and he's fit with the club. He's a Villa fan. You look before at how angry the fan base were when Steve Bruce was in charge. Do you remember when was it a cabbage they threw at him in like one of his last games?
That's Steve Bruce.
It's completely changed under Smith, hasn't it? And like I said earlier when we're doing on this, Villa Park's going to be up for it. Yeah, and it's going to be an intimidating atmosphere. It's going to be a tough game. We said a few weeks ago before the United game, you're looking at form, Villa's the one that you're a bit wary of. Hopefully Liverpool can go along the City route and just get a goal early in a half, granted maybe the first half, not the second half, and kill it. We'll see.
And as much as we say the focus won't be on City, Gorsty, looking at the bigger picture, Liverpool cannot afford a 3-point swing ahead of next weekend when City come to town. Oh
no, that is the one thing you do not want. You don't want to be going into that thinking City can go level on points, particularly when it was 8 points 2 weeks ago. So yeah, it's a big game, but they always are, aren't they, these days with Liverpool. I think I'm Genk next week at home. That'll be a bit of a chance to rest 1 or 2 ahead of that game against City next week, but the focus should be firmly on this one. And as Theo says, they've got plenty of threat. I quite like what I've seen of them so far, to be honest. Thought they were unlucky against Tottenham early doors. So yeah, it'll be a tough one for Liverpool, and this is exactly the type of game that Villa fans would have dreamed of when they were slugging it out in the Championship, wouldn't they, last season. This is why they fought so hard to get back into the Premier League for afternoons like this, so they'll certainly be up for it in the Holt End.
Absolutely right. We'll be turning to team selection then. Let's go back to front. As good a game as Kelleher had the other night, and obviously Adrian's had a good season. I mean, Alisson is in goal, is he not?
Andy Lonergan.
Andy Lonergan, of course.
Andy Lonergan.
How could I forget? Theo's fave. Alisson in net. The back line then, I guess we're all saying Trent and Robertson on the flanks.
Yep.
And then it's simply a question of who partners Van Dijk. So, Theo, who's your other man in the middle?
I want it to be Gomez, but it's going to be Lovren, and then I can see him maybe throwing Gomez in instead for the Champions League game. So I'll go Lovren.
Gorst, did you see it playing out like that?
Yeah. I think maybe with Joel Matip being out for X amount of games, Jurgen Klopp wouldn't specify, but maybe with him missing the next couple of games, it's a chance to get Joe Gomez back up to speed and back into the kind of form that he was in earlier last season when he was so good before that injury. But I think he might just stick with Dejan Lovren at the moment.
I agree with you. I think it'll be Lovren tomorrow and Gomez against Genk, and then assess the situation again for City, I suppose. So midfield, I think we're all agreed that Fabinho is not worth the risk, which presumably means Henderson in the deeper role again.
Genie for me.
Interesting. Genie there. So go on, what would your three be then, Theo?
Henderson and James Milner against his former club. It's that Brexit midfield again, isn't it? But granted in a slightly different role. But I think they're the ones on form. Like Alex Oxlade-Chamberlain, whilst he's getting the goals, he's still feeling his way back. And James Milner's been so consistent this season. People have written off Jordan Henderson at times, and he rose to them emphatically last week against Spurs. And Alden, I suppose, he's a good player as that number 6. There's a bit more about him. He's always looked comfortable there. And whilst Jordan Henderson can do it, I think there's more of a reluctance now from Klopp to put him back in that role. I haven't had him more advanced, whereas he's quite confident putting Genie wherever he wants. It's
a good point, actually, thinking about it. And obviously, Henderson, Gorsty, coming off the back of that recent goal against Spurs. How would you go in the middle?
I want to start Oxlade-Chamberlain, but I'm wary that he hasn't played much football, and asking him to make another start so soon after what was an absolute epic that must have took so much out of the legs on Wednesday, I'd be wary of him starting that. So as much as I want to stick him in, I'm not, and I'm going to stick with Henderson as the number 6, who I think has played there a lot more than Wijnaldum over the course of their Liverpool careers. Milner and Wijnaldum, yeah.
Okay. And then the front line, I guess it's that eternal question: has Origi done enough for a start, or is it the usual suspects there?
Usual suspects. Was it last time at Villa Park? It was the 6-0 where Origi came off the bench and scored. So repeat if that's fine. You can come off the bench and finish the job.
We'll take that.
Get another kiss off the fans.
Gorsty, same again.
Yeah, Origi is even before last season when he scored all those crucial goals against Barcelona and Everton and Madrid, even before then, his kind of Liverpool's status was a man to get the big goals without contributing a lot in between. You look at scored against Dortmund, didn't he? Home and away, scored against Everton when he was really in the form of his Liverpool career. So there is a spot for him in this squad, but I think long term he's got a big task getting those front three out the way, and it will be the front three tomorrow.
Final thing that remains then, predictions. Theo, gives us a scoreline.
I want to go for another 6-0, but it's not going to be anywhere as comfortable. Let's go 2-1 Liverpool.
2-1 Liverpool, Gorsty?
I actually think it'll be 1-0 Liverpool. Tough.
James Milner against his former club.
Penalty, yeah. We'll take it.
I would absolutely take that. I'll go 3-1 just to be slightly different. I do think Villa have got something about them and they'll get one, but as good as they are going forward, I think they are pretty porous at the back, so 2 or 3 for the Reds, hopefully. And we will leave it there. Plenty going on this weekend, not just the trip to Villa. There is, of course, the mini derby. The Reds and Everton under-23s taking each other on at the academy. I think kicks off at 2 p.m. on Saturday, so there will be plenty of coverage on the Echo website about that. And, of course, Aston Villa against Liverpool. And we'll be back on Monday where we look back at both games and ahead to Champions League action and, of course, Man City next weekend. So goodbye for now.